Bless you. think we're ready to call the meeting to order. Hello, everybody. I'll start with some official housekeeping language, and then I have a few remarks I need to say. In order to maintain order during this large meeting and in this unusual format, the following settings and protocols will be observed. Participants are muted and are asked to remain muted during the meeting. Participants' video is also disabled in order to minimize bandwidth. Senators wishing to speak should use the raise hand function when you're called on, and the meeting host will unmute you and enable your video. Voting will be accomplished using Zoom's polling function. When a vote is initiated, a poll will pop up on participants' screens. If you are attending and are not a senator, we ask that you please do not vote. People attending by telephone only will not be able to vote. So with respect for how we formally open a meeting, I want to take a moment informally and as a community to ask for all of us collectively where we are as we join in this atypical way to have a moment of silence for George Floyd's passing and all of the pain that our community has experienced both before, during, and since. Okay, thank you. Before we begin today, I want to express my heartfelt wishes for your safety and well-being in every way that we might define both of those terms. This is a very painful time for our community, not just for our university community, of course, but also for our city, for our state, for the entire country, and really around the world. I know we all are grieving and joined together in our grief for George Floyd and for his family and friends. And I join you and support you and hope you join me and we support each other in demanding accountability and justice. And along these lines, I offer an apology in advance because I will leave today's Senate meeting early because I'm going to meet students who are coming here and want to talk. So Professor Carol Chomsky, Senate Vice Chair, will chair the meeting in my absence and upon my departure. And I thank you, Carol, and everyone for your flexibility and your understanding. So it's a hard day to have agendas, and we want to respect that. And so today we will discuss and vote on a statement from EAD. And for those who wish to, we will also discuss the updated draft and recommendations of the Finance and Operations Planning Work Group. FCC Chair Amy Pittenger, Vice Chair Phil Ullman, and Interim VP for HR Ken Horstman will lead that discussion. But the EAD item has been extended to 60 minutes to meet our community's request, desire, and need for reflection and discussion. Professor and EAD Chair Teddy Potter will introduce that statement and resolution. And because it is a difficult day and a difficult time to think in terms of agendas and business of the day, we're going to do this again and have a special Senate meeting this Thursday, June 4th, time to be announced, still working out those final details, to continue the financial proposal discussion for those of you who would rather not, can't, or feel that that's simply a better time. We respect and appreciate that and want to accommodate that. So this will give the community more time to discuss, more time to ask questions. You can attend both. If you listen today and have follow-up, that is obviously absolutely fine as well. Then the vote on the faculty salary financial proposal will still be held on Tuesday, June 9th in a meeting scheduled to run from 11 to 1. Provost Croson and I also want to discuss with the Senate the possible responses and changes that we will make for fall. I know that is a topic that many of us have been thinking about, even if those thoughts are somewhat removed from top of mind, given the circumstances and challenges of the day. But we will update you on fall scenario planning, and you'll receive an email from the provost, if not tomorrow, then in the next day or two, with more information, so we can discuss as a community and do the appropriate brainstorming and consultation decision-making together around fall scenarios and the fall academic calendar at that Thursday special Senate meeting, if possible. So please stay tuned for more information. We're working closely with Amy and Phil and Carol and SCEP Chair Jennifer Goodnow on all of that. So with that, I'm going to turn us back to today's plans and say that first, we have a pending motion to approve the following special rule, that each speaker is limited to 2 minutes each time they are recognized. This requires a vote, and so host, please initiate the poll. Okay, 10 more seconds. Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. Item 2 today concerns a statement from the Equity, Access, and Diversity Committee, which it has submitted for consideration by the University Senate. It's my pleasure to call on Professor Potter to introduce the item. Teddy?
Greetings. My name is Teddy Potter, and I am the chair of the Senate Equity, Access, and Diversity Committee for 2019-2020. Thank you for allowing us to present this statement today. I want to begin by acknowledging the deep pain, fear, and anger of many, many people related to the wrongful death of George Floyd. I also want to acknowledge the deep pain, fear, and anger of people of color, for whom these emotions are all too familiar. We have seen patterns of sustained institutionalized racism and inequities and disparities, yet any corrective actions have fallen far short of offering a transformative solution. Therefore, the Senate Equity, Access, and Diversity Committee wanted to take immediate action to break the pattern of silence and inaction. These committees usually don't act fast, but we felt it essential to move quickly and with strength. The leadership of the EAD committee met Wednesday and initiated a preliminary statement. On Friday, we held an emergency meeting of the EAD membership. The makeup of this committee also includes membership from all 5 systems campuses. The entire committee worked on the content of the statement Friday through Saturday, and the committee membership was invited to take a vote Saturday afternoon. We recognize the statement is not perfect and represents a humble intent to make a public commitment to addressing the root causes of racism and consequent inequities. We have received 3 proposed additions to the document and believe they strengthen the message and intent. We move to accept the following additions. Under the final statement of section 1, it's being modified to state, we applaud the people of all walks of life who came out to protest this grotesque injustice in a way that holistically lifts up the local and greater communities. We further applaud the organizers of these protests who, in the midst of their anger and pain, still called for participants to wear masks and practice social distancing. To section 3 or section 2, we add an additional bullet, and it will become the 3rd bullet. We urge police and military in Minneapolis to continue to meet peaceful protests with peace of their own, both now and in the future. And then we accept a friendly modification of the final bullet in section 2. We recognize the clear supremacy of all lives over property. In this context, we advocate against rioting, looting, and express our sympathy and concern about small business owners and community members whose livelihoods and homes have been destroyed. We welcome further discussion on this statement, and I will now turn it over to incoming EAD Chair Ross LaBeur-Roholt.
Hello and welcome. And I first want to say it's truly an honor that we are here and presenting this proposal. As Teddy has mentioned, proposals like these often take an extended time to craft. And I think this demonstrates the deep commitment and the strong position of the committee around this issue. And as we say at the end of this statement, the Equity, Access, and Diversity Committee commits to collaborating with others to bring about the actions outlined both in this proposal and the ones that will continue to emerge over the next year. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I think we can take a motion and then second, and then we can call for the discussion. So is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion?
President Gable, first on the list, I have Greta Friedman Sanchez would like to be recognized.
Okay, hi Greta.
Hello. Thank you so much for your effort in drafting the statement. Faculty at the Humphrey School have these 4 additional items that we would like to be considered. The first one is to add to the statement, advocate for residential requirements so that our community can be policed by professionals that live in our communities. The second one is demand that community review boards are fully funded and staffed and have the authority to recommend suspensions or firing of officers with multiple complaints. The third one is institute testing and training of all members of the police force on implicit bias and race relations. And the fourth one is provide full transparency and reporting on racial disparities in traffic stops, arrests, police use of force, arraignments and bail setting, plea bargaining, and sentencing. I would be happy to provide by email the exact wording that I have just read. Thank you.
Thank you, Greta. Next.
Next on the list, we have Tabitha Greer-Reed.
Hi, Tabitha.
Hello. So I'm going to tell you a very specific way that institutional racism has played out at this university since my time here and make a specific recommendation. Learning resource centers or cultural centers with dedicated space and professional staff for Black students, Asian Pacific Islander students, and Latinx students have been erased. And the process involved first moving them to the outer edges of campus to Claver Court, so literally on the margins, physically marginalized, and then wiping them out altogether in terms of their individual cultural identities and mission as specific racial ethnic resources to create what we now know as MK, the Multicultural Center for Academic Excellence. As if the racial cultural identities didn't matter specifically, and as the name implies, the focus should be academic. Now I want to say MK is a very important space for students, but I also know it as an act of erasure and not wanting to feel invisible anymore. There's been the resurrection of the Asian Pacific American Resource Center, or APARC, that came about in 2018. So now we have 2, the Native American Resource Center, which has continued to exist this whole time, and the resurrection of the Asian Pacific American Resource Center. Nowhere do our Black students go in the wake of all this. Our institutional response needs to dedicate resources, space, and staff to supporting the racial and cultural identities of our minoritized students who are underrepresented and feel under siege. What we have now is insufficient and it's ad hoc. bring back our cultural resource centers in a fulsome and institutionally wide way, so these students have a
30
dedicated
seconds.
with staff to find support and resources for their lived experience, daily realities, emotional pain, and nuanced collective identities. Thank you.
Thank you, Tabitha. Chris, who's next?
Yes. Next on the list, I have Kevin Wendt.
Hi, Kevin.
Hello, thank you, Madam President. Thank you for your excellent leadership through all of the unprecedented events of the last several months, including the pandemic and the last week. And thank you also, Chairman Teddy Potter and the committee for drafting this statement. I move to strike the 6th bullet that starts, "We thank Hennepin County District Attorney Mike Freeman," and also strike the word "offer" and insert the word "promote" in the first bullet of the next section that begins, "Although we are heartened."
So that would be a friendly amendment.
No, ma'am. It's been moved and seconded. There cannot be a friendly amendment at this point.
Okay. So let me get advice on how we would receive your feedback. Okay, then we would open the floor to a debate to this amendment as offered. Kevin, can you read it one more time since it was brief but said quickly, just so we can make sure everyone heard it, and then we can
Certainly.
debate the amendment. Thank you.
I move to strike the 6th bullet in the first set of bullets, starting, "We thank Hennepin County District Attorney Mike Freeman." Strike that bullet. And then in the second set of bullets, move to strike the word "offer" and insert the word "promote" in the first bullet that begins, "We urge members of Police Officers Federation," etc.
I know the point was made that it was moved and seconded, but I think we still need to ask the original person making the motion from the committee if they take it as a friendly amendment.
So accepted.
That's
Okay, so if it's taken as a friendly amendment, then we will see if there's any additional debate. Is there anybody else who wishes to comment from the floor before we call the vote on the amendment? Okay, host, if you could call the poll, we'll need 50% approval in order for the friendly amendment to pass.
It,
I'd ask that anyone else desire to vote, please vote now. And last call. There being 144 ayes and 21 nays, the motion's approved.
Thank you. Is there any additional debate?
With the hands raised, I see David Andow.
Okay, David.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the committee for drafting this statement. I just want to make a small suggestion to the second point of the first list regarding President Gabel. And I would suggest that we add the words leadership and before swift and decisive, because I think it's very important to recognize the role of the leadership of the president in this time when there seems to be a dearth of leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Potter, do you accept that as a friendly amendment?
Heartily.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm told through the beauty of technology that we don't need to vote on that. So apologies as we work through this time, and thank you very much for the support. So, and to you also as well. Okay, and who's next, host?
Next we have Amy Ma.
Senator Ma.
Good afternoon. My name is Amy, and I'm serving as the current and outgoing chair of the Student Senate. I'm thankful for the EAD committee and their work in crafting this statement, and I know that no matter how much we workshop this, it will not be perfect nor sufficient to address the pain or anger of the community. I also thank countless Black activists for their mental, emotional, and physical energy, as folks have literally been doing this work for decades. And I want to express that as someone non-Black, I am horrified and furious at the fact that it's taken this much death and violence to finally have this conversation. I call on all of us, including myself, to do better and hold ourselves accountable to more than what's in this statement. I want to see stronger asks regarding the relationship of UMPD and nearby police departments, not only MPD, and increased community accountability that critically examines the ways we have failed our own students time and time again. Just yesterday, police were on our campus taunting Black students by blowing kisses at them. I want to know that UMPD will be disarmed and defunded, and that this money will go toward programs that actually serve our students, like MK, or perhaps additional programs. I know these are large asks and likely beyond the hour that we have allocated today, but I also want you all to keep in mind that people are dying as we wait to educate ourselves, and I'm furious at my own pace. Regarding this specific statement, I would like the language that we advocate against rioting and looting to be removed from the last point. I would like to remind everyone that protests are not meant to be peaceful for the perpetrators. Rather, they are supposed to confront the issue, the murder of an unarmed Black man at the hands of our publicly funded police officers, and that justice has not been swift nor served. I will not tell Black communities how to feel, protest, heal, or mourn, and I hope you do not either. Thank you.
3 seconds.
Next on the list, we have Isaiah Ogren.
Isaiah?
Thank you, President and Chair Gable. I would also like to echo my colleague Amy Ma's sentiments of appreciation for the committee in taking the time to swiftly address this, and once again state that any improvements that we attempt to make to it are made in a spirit of collaboration with their hard work. I also echo Amy's sentiments that the University of Minnesota Police needs to reevaluate its relationships with all local municipal police departments. And that we also need to begin a conversation about demilitarization and disarmament of UMPD, a resolution to which effect I have drafted and will be circulating to the entire Senate shortly. I would also offer the following friendly amendments, if not in my exact words, something for in the sentiment. In the last bullet of the first section, I would insert, after we applaud the people of all walks of life who came out to peacefully protest this grotesque injustice, I would insert, we also acknowledge that civil disobedience may, and indeed in this case, is required to transform systems of oppression. And we stand with those who attempt to do so. And then I would also, in the second section of bullets, after the second to last bullet, so after we call on all people to resist complacency, I would insert a bullet that states something to the effect of, we as a university accept our role in shifting cultural norms as an institution of higher education, and we therefore reject the notion that violence is required for safety in our communities and commit to exploring alternative avenues for community safety and well-being.
30 seconds.
I would also like to reiterate something that Amy said, which as a non-Black person, I want to be aware of the space that I take up, and we should all maintain space and cede to the wisdom of our brothers and sisters who are hurting so much more than we can understand now. And with that, I yield. Thank you.
Thank you, Isaiah. I want to go back and clean up, if you will. Forgive me, and we'll call for yours in a moment, Isaiah and Amy. But when we moved on from Greta's remarks, I want to make sure that we're able to take in those amendments. So if we could pause, and I could ask Professor Potter if we need to repeat Greta's amendments and see if you take them as friendly or if you recall them.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Amber, if you could reread them for us, please.
Yes. Let me just get the right screen here. So advocate for residential requirements so that our communities can be policed by professionals that live in our communities. Demand that community review boards are fully funded and staffed and have the authority to recommend suspensions or firing of officers with multiple complaints. Institute testing and training of all members of the police force on implicit bias and race relations. Provide full transparency and reporting on racial disparities in traffic stops, arrests, policy use of force, arraignments and bail setting, plea bargaining, and sentencing.
We accept all three as friendly amendments.
Okay, thank you. Isaiah, we'll come back to you now. Can you state the exact wording of your amendment for us, please?
Yes, ma'am, I'm happy to, though I believe that Amy Ma called for an amendment before I did. So I would just request that we address her amendment before.
Apologies. Okay. Amy, could you state the portion of your remarks that addressed the amendment for us, please?
Sure, yeah, sorry, I didn't realize I had the ability to unmute myself now. But I would like to see the language that says we advocate against rioting and looting to be removed from the last point. I don't think we as a university need to say that we advocate for this, but I also don't think it's our place to make a moral judgment on this.
Thank you. Professor Potter? Do you accept that as a friendly amendment?
I consider that a friendly amendment.
Okay, thank you. Now, Isaiah, thank you. If you could, there you go.
Of course, and thank you. So the first amendment that I am proposing is on the final bullet of the first section of bullets. I would add as a friendly amendment, we also acknowledge that civil disobedience may, and in this case is indeed required to transform systems of oppression and stand with those on the front lines working towards that transformation. I would ask that the clerk delete the that I inserted. And then I would also add after the second to last bullet on the second set of bullets, so after we call on all people to resist complacency, insert another bullet that says, we as a university accept our role in shifting cultural norms and expectations as a institution of higher education. We therefore reject the notion that violence is required for public safety and commit to doing our part to explore alternate avenues for community safety and well-being.
Professor Potter?
I consider those friendly amendments.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Isaiah. Chris, who's next?
Next, we have Jerry Cohen.
Jerry, please.
Okay, I have a very simple friendly amendment, I think. In the preamble for this statement, it says, Police officers stood watch over the scene. This appears to be inconsistent with videos that the New York Times put out, where it shows up to 2 officers to appear culpable and did not interfere.
Jerry, I don't know if this happened to everybody else, but I lost you for a minute there. Would you mind repeating?
Sure. So I'm suggesting that we change Minneapolis police officers stood watch over the scene to Minnesota police officers appear culpable and did not intervene, which I believe is consistent with the films that the New York Times released.
Professor Potter?
I don't really understand the difference between a friendly amendment and a amendment that we don't necessarily wish to adopt. I think there's concern about weighing in on the officers as a university.
My understanding is that we would then open the floor to debate to the amendment and call a vote on that amendment. Would that be your preference?
That is my preference.
Would anybody like to comment on Jerry's amendment?
Can that amendment please be restated more clearly?
Jerry, do you mind?
No, it's very simple. So it says the officers stood watch over the scene. And I think that that actually is a misstatement of fact if you actually look at the because they actually were on top of the individual. And so it would be some rewording of that is necessary because we're making a judgment as it now stands, stood watch over the scene. It appears to be incorrect because they weren't standing, they were leaning on him. And so I think I suggest the words appear culpable in exchange for stood watch over, because I think that's consistent with the films that have now been released. So it's just very simple, 2 words, appear culpable in exchange for 5 words, stood watch over the scene.
Senator Cohen, would you accept if we said that they did not intervene despite Mr. Floyd's urgent cries?
I would accept that.
Okay, Jerry, you want to restate your amendment then?
So mine would be to delete stood watch over the scene and just so it says police officers did not intervene.
Okay, Professor Potter?
That is acceptable.
Okay, thank you. Chris, who's next?
Next on my list, I have Michael Minta.
Michael?
Yes. Okay. Yes, I'm here. Thanks, President Gabel, for your leadership on this issue, the strong stance that you've took in terms of being responsive to all faculty and staff and the students, particularly Black faculty and Black staff. So I appreciate your efforts on this. This is just more of a question for the committee, and not necessarily amendment, but something in terms of these principles. Like the Humphrey School really anticipated a lot of the suggestions that I was going to make. And so, in particular in terms of diversity of the police force, which is included in this document, but I'm trying to understand, is this kind of like guiding principles that the administration will use? Because I'm thinking that in terms of what law enforcement entity the university will use, I think that some of these principles should be used in the contracting of this. So if we're talking about transparency in terms of their efforts in terms of diversifying the force, I think that should be explicitly stated in a contract. I think in terms of their police stops or just around the university campus, I think that should be included. So I'm not saying that this should be put in the document, but it's something that should be considered if to be more than just a statement of principles, but something that we can hold whatever law enforcement entity that the university decides to use, that is articulated in. That's all.
Okay, Professor Potter, would you like to reply?
Yes, thank you for your comments, and definitely they reveal that this is an organic and ongoing process that will move into the future. We're hoping that the task force, the call for a task force of students, staff, and faculty will be able to address some of the suggestions that you made, as well as suggestions that will be made in weeks and months to come. So I don't know if that was a specific call for an additional bullet. Maybe if you could clarify for me.
No. If it's going to be included in the task force, where it's in terms of the contracting, that is a condition as opposed to just some type of high ideas of what we would like them to do. I think it would just be more specific if we had it within the contract. This is the type of information we want to include, and not just we hope that you do it. This is what we want you to do if you want a contract with the University of Minnesota.
Thank you. We really do hope that this task force will have broad representation across the university and systems campuses. We hope that people will be doing very careful looks within their own colleges and schools of policies, procedures that need to be modified and adjusted to really get at the root cause of institutionalized racism, and be bringing ideas forward to the task force once it's established.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you both. Chris, who's next?
Next we have Katie Johnston Goodstar.
Katie?
If we can get her on.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Thank you very much, Chris. Okay, I just wanted to commend the students and the Diversity and Equity Committee for their leadership on this. I had two comments. The first is that I caution us not to forget that Indigenous peoples experience police brutality at rates similar to the Black community, and that the colonial history of Minnesota is part of this context. Let us commit to remembering and struggling with this history and all of its complexity. And the second comment that I had is I concur with Senator Ma, and I move that we strike or amend the language on rioting. I think there lacks a public definition on rioting, and too often in our history, I think we have dismissed some civil actions as riotous and anti-American, while glorifying others as freedom fighting and patriotic. And I think that we need to take care and not use a word that carries with it that implicitly racist assumption.
Katie, are there any amendments formally in your proposal that you would like us to bring forward to the committee?
I would like us to strike that language on rioting.
Okay. So Professor Potter, given the previous proposal, are you comfortable accepting that as a friendly amendment?
Yes, and let me just state what it currently states. With these modifications, we recognize the clear supremacy of all lives over property. In this context, we express our sympathy and concern about small business owners and community members whose livelihoods and homes have been destroyed.
Does that capture your concerns, Katie, given the previous strike of the language from Amy Ma's friendly amendment?
I think it does. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Chris, who's next?
Next we have Scott Petty.
Hello, Scott.
Hi, this is more of a persnickety point. I've been in the queue for a while. If we're operating under Robert's rules, there's no such thing as a friendly amendment. A motion that's put before the body belongs to the body. The author does not control whether amendments are added or not. Every amendment, whether classified as friendly or not, is supposed to be procedurally dealt with this exact same way and requires voting.
My understanding, Scott, is that our Constitution allows us to proceed using the method that we have been using today.
Okay, I'm just saying if we were operating under Robert's rules, that's what Robert's rules actually says.
Okay. The Senate rules should trump Robert's rules. And so taking your observation under advisement, we'll proceed according to the rules of this body specifically. Thank you. Okay, so Chris, next in the queue.
Next, I see Steph Heim.
Hi, everyone. I appreciate being a part of this conversation with all of you and the leadership that our university president and others have taken. This friendly amendment may feel minor, but my understanding is that George Floyd was actually a resident of St. Louis Park and not Minneapolis. And I may be wrong in that. I think that's what I've been reading, and that just feels like maybe an important distinction, that he wasn't a Minneapolis resident, he was a St. Louis Park resident.
So Steph, would the friendly amendment be that we, upon confirmation of his residency, amend accordingly?
Yes, please.
Potter? Thank you. Professor Potter, your thoughts?
And I think that that is accurate reporting of his residency. I think it depends on if people consider suburbs as part of the Minneapolis, greater Minneapolis. So I will defer to the vote of the people.
So let's take that as a motion then. Is there a motion to hear this amendment?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Is there any debate from the floor as to Steph's proposal to specifically identify St. Louis Park?
Could we, instead of saying, I'm sorry, this is Becky Nelson from UMD.
Yes, please, Becky.
Oh, okay. Could we, instead of saying Minneapolis citizen, could we say something about a community citizen or something more broad? Because I agree that stating Minneapolis when it's St. Louis Park feels inaccurate, but that the broader implication of the broader city of Minneapolis is important. So I'm wondering if there's a way to talk about him as a community member.
So Steph, Becky's proposal could be considered a friendly amendment to your motion to reframe St. Louis Park to alternative but more inclusive language. Do you have thoughts on that?
I'm supportive of that. I have a colleague I was just engaged with and who is a Minneapolis resident, and some previous communication that came out from a dean of our university referred to Mr. Floyd as a Minneapolis resident, and she felt that was a bit insensitive. So I just, having just come from that conversation with her, just feel like I want to make sure that we're honoring his place of residence and inclusive. So whatever you choose is okay with me.
So Professor Potter, I think we would need to call let's call the vote on Steph's amendment as modified to say the Minneapolis community. Am I correct on that?
Would it be possible to drop the location and just say the Senate Equity, Access, and Diversity Committee condemns the death of George Floyd at the hands of
Steph, would you modify your amendment accordingly?
Yes, I'm supportive of that.
Okay, and then Teddy? Would you accept that new language as a friendly amendment?
I accept the new language.
Okay, thank you. Chris, who's next?
My apologies. Next, I have James Kotner.
James?
Hi.
Hi, James.
Thank you for taking my comments. Basically, I'm going to suggest that we strike the first bullet in the second list. This is the bullet that talks about the kind of training that the Minneapolis police should be doing. And personally, I'm not comfortable telling them how they need to train themselves. I think I would be okay with advocating for revisiting how they do their training, but I also find the language that's used here is likely to have the opposite effect of what's intended, because it's somewhat inflammatory, and I see no reason why people in the police business are going to want to listen to what university faculty say as far as it goes to training of police officers.
Okay, so the request is to strike that bullet entirely. That's the proposed amendment.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, James. Teddy, your thoughts?
We believe that the protests are a deep reflection of inactivity in the past. And we wanted to put in as strong a language as we could to create transformative change. And therefore, we did want to address education.
But do you really think that this language is going to get the kind of change that you want? This is just going to piss people off.
Okay, so let's handle that by taking the motion, taking it as a motion, and let's see if there is a motion in a second, and then we can debate that issue. So first we'll call for the motion.
I move that we strike the first bullet point in the second list.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. So the question on the floor is language in the underlying motion around training. Are there any comments?
Let me just clarify that it's a little difficult to know if there are comments on this particular issue. I'm going to try to ask these folks to unmute themselves if they have a comment currently. So I see Isaiah Ogren, did you have a comment on this item?
I did. I would speak in opposition to this motion. I don't think that it is particularly effective, nor is it necessarily our job to attempt to prognosticate what MPD is going to like or not like in the statement. I suspect that they will not like the vast majority of it. We also know that warrior style trainings are a definite problem. They are so much a problem that the mayor, who is ostensibly in control of the police department, has banned them, and yet they continue to be used. So I don't think this is about trying to make the police department, who has in this case acted contrary to their commanding head person's express orders, pleased. So I would be in firm and unyielding opposition to striking that.
So what you're saying then is that they're not listening to the mayor, but they're going to listen to us. I think this is just going to make things worse.
I'm not making any claims about what MPD will or will not do. I'm saying that as a university, it is important for us to stand up for what we believe the right thing to be and to help exert public pressure on officials such as Mayor Frey to insist that these not only be officially banned, but actually banned. I'm not trying to make MPD feel good or do anything. We have no jurisdiction over them whatsoever. The only thing we can do is stand up for our values and pressure public officials who do have that standing to continue to do the right thing. And if we do believe that it is substantively the right thing, then that's what we should say, regardless of whether we think
it may be the right thing, but it's
Actually, let's.
we're still telling them to do something. And when they do this training, it's in their own free time. It's
Okay.
not on the clock.
James, let's make sure we can get through all of the comments and then why don't we hold your reply until we're through the feedback from the floor on your motion.
President Gable, if I could jump in real quick, I would just like some clarification on the making of priority motions. With like the raise hand feature, if I would like to move like a point of order or point of information, I'm unable to do so until I'm recognized. I just wanted to know what we're doing right there.
Chris, what are we doing right there?
Well, I would say that folks do have the opportunity to unmute themselves and raise a point of order. We're trying to keep it as orderly as possible, but I would say, Matthew, if you do have a point of order, that you raise it at this time then.
Thank you. I don't have anything right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Matthew.
So again, to the topic of the proposed amendment, I see Tabitha Greer Reed with her hand raised. Do you have a comment for this part?
Sorry about that. Actually, so mostly my comment was about adding more specific language for my original comment because I don't think I did that well. But I do agree with Isaiah that I think that this statement is about being principled, and I think that's the direction that we should be taking: principality versus like appeasement. But we're still in debate right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
If you would like to comment on James's motion, just unmute yourself and speak, and we'll try to work through them one at a time.
This is Conway Clausen from the Center for Allied Health Programs.
Hi, Janice.
I'd like to concur with Isaiah in opposition to this amendment. As an individual with police officers in the family, not in this location, but in another state, this type of training has been essentially banned from many institutions. I think that we need to emphasize the fact that this may be a contributing factor. We are urging, we are not demanding, we are urging them to change their ways. And I think that is very appropriate.
Okay, thank you, Janice. Who would like to speak next?
I had James Farnsworth on the list next, I believe, for this discussion.
Hi, James.
Hi, I'm President Gale. Pardon my appearance on my way to join fellow students at East Cliff.
I'll see you in a minute.
Yeah, right. I would like to echo my colleague Isaiah Ogren in strong opposition to the statement. I think given the University of Minnesota's presence in the community, being a strong cornerstone institution of the community and of the city, it's our job, especially as the highest governing body, to speak out on really urgent issues like this and make statements of principle. I don't think this is about telling police, the Minneapolis Police Department what to do, any of those logistical rebuttals that were made. I think this is very urgent for us to do. I would speak out in strong opposition to the proposed amendment and thank my colleague Isaiah for his comments.
Okay, thank you, James. Who's next, Chris?
Next, I see Teresa Renicky on this amendment.
Teresa?
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I also agree with Isaiah. I think we have to take a stand for the community that we represent at the university as students, staff, and faculty. And I disagree with striking out that was proposed before and agree with what Isaiah stated.
Thank you.
Can I call the question? May I call the question?
Are there any additional comments from the floor that are materially different from the points we've heard raised thus far?
I'd like to make a comment. I could just could I say just one thing, that I agree with almost everything that's been said. My only concern is that by having this in here, it's going to do the opposite of what we want it to do. I stand, by everything that's in here, but I don't think, antagonizing the police is going to help us in any way move forward on this problem. And I'll shut up. So.
Thank you, James. Okay, any material additions? Because we do need to call the question.
I have a point of clarification.
Yes, please.
So in this bullet point, it's referring to the Police Officers Federation of Minneapolis. I don't know the whole organization of that unit and what it has to do with actually the police department, but we've been talking about what the police department does and does not do. And this is the Police Officers Federation. So I want to make sure that we're not confusing which group we're talking about and what the impact of that is.
Okay, Teddy, do you have a reply to that as to whether it impacts the motion on the floor?
I don't believe it does.
I'm Williams, and I've been, I don't have a space where I can raise my hand.
Please, Oliver.
Yeah, but I do want to say that as other people said, it is an issue about principle, and you can't make them do anything, but you can tell them where you stand on principle. And I think that's important. And not only for us to do it within the University of Minnesota, but there are universities across the nation that are looking at us. I've been contacted by colleagues from different universities across the United States wondering what we're doing. And Madam President, the fact that you have made the statement that you've made makes a difference. But also taking action and stating where we are is something that's important. So
principles are nice, but if we make the problem worse, I
don't think that the problem can be worse.
I think I would like to make 3 quick material additions to this.
Okay, 1 second, Matthew. Let me just make sure Oliver was done. Oliver, did that conclude your remarks?
Yes.
Okay. And then Matthew, please feel free to proceed. And then after you, I'm going to call the question on the motion.
Yes. So kind of as a point of clarification to this is, are we not going to exhaust the speakers list before the question is called, such that everyone who had been recognized to speak, like everyone who has their hands raised and Chris has already taken them down, would be able to speak on the matter being called before that motion would then be addressed? Or am I wrong on that?
We are also trying to manage within the time of the meeting, which is why we ask voluntarily if people have heard their comment represented materially that they would withdraw given the length of the discussion. And we're trying to manage it that way unless the question is called first, which it was, but we are proceeding anyway.
Thank you. So in regards to a previous point that someone made regarding the Police Officers Federation versus the police department, the reason why it's the Federation is because the Federation stepped in to fund the training after Mayor Fry tried to, it was no longer a part of the actual MPD to offer this training. He directed them to discontinue the training. However, the Federation stepped in on their own expense to offer the training to these officers. So if we were to stop this training, we'd have to stop them from offering it as well. And then my addition, I want to say, is to James's point. Respectfully, I'm not exactly sure that we're speaking to the Minneapolis Police Department, although our bullet points are for them and about them. I respectfully do not think that they're very much in the mood to listen to many other people as to how they should be doing their conduct. And yes, I do think that it may or may not antagonize them, but this is a statement of support for our community, not necessarily for the police, and saying this is what we think the university should be, what our position should be right now. And the police can ignore it or they cannot ignore it, but we are making it clear what our values are. And, quite frankly, I think that over 10 years, if they were interested in listening to us, then literally, we would have anyone's answering to the Citizen Review Board complaints. There's been thousands of them, And the most discipline any MPD officer's gotten is a 1-week suspension. No one's been fired. No one's been, anything more than that. So they're really not listening to us already. So I don't think we should be that concerned about whether or not they're going to about this. And thank you. That is the conclusion of what I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. All right, returning to our earlier point, I'm going to call the question. So the motion is to strike the language where we urge training. Can we call the vote and call the poll, please, Chris?
We give about 10 more seconds for everyone to vote. Please vote if you wish. And last call. There being 145, or excuse me, 24 ayes and 145 nays, the motion does not prevail.
Okay, thank you. Chris, how many people are in the queue to discuss the original motion itself as now amended?
As of this moment, I see 7 names, a few of which have already spoken. I'm not sure if they just have their hand raised yet.
Okay, colleagues, in light of that, I'm going to defer to Vice Chair Carol Chomsky to finish this portion of the review. With great appreciation, Chair Potter and members of EAD for your work, and members of the Senate at large for your obvious passion, compassion, and careful attention to this document. I have students on my front lawn, so I'm going to go outside and meet them and talk to them, and hand this over to her very capable hands and excuse myself. So thank you all very much. I hope you are well, and we will continue this conversation through the remainder of the afternoon and again on Thursday.
Thank you, President Gable, for speaking with students. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
I have to unmute myself. I think I see Tabitha Greer-Reed next on the queue if you're still waiting to speak.
Yes, thank you, Carol. So I think my initial comment was too dense, and I wanted to add specific language to bullet 4 in the second set of bullets, where it says this may be in the form of additional funding for programs supporting underrepresented student groups. And I think I would like to specifically call out including specific cultural resource centers reflective of specific racial identities as part of that list of changes in the curriculum, increased support for public engagement, et cetera.
So can you
read that one more time slowly so I can type it?
Including specific cultural resource centers reflective of specific racial identities.
Professor Potter, do you take that as a friendly amendment?
I definitely do.
Sorry, I talked over you. Was that a yes?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Next, I see Jan Werner.
Okay, let me unmute. No, I had a point about contribution to the discussion of bullet 1 of the second part of the, but now it's gone, so I am happy to pass my voice to anybody else.
All right, thank you. Noel Noonan.
Computer. Sorry, thank you, Vice Chair Chomsky, just getting the technology together. And I just have first I have a procedural question that I don't want to count towards my 2 minutes, but I think it's imperative that the body be provided, that we be provided with a clear and updated statement prior to a final vote and with time to read it over so that all members can understand the actual language. And I don't know if that's possible, but I think we've had so many changes that would be important so that University Senate could understand what we're voting on. And then I also wanted to mention that I think I need a little extra time, and I have 2 senators who have agreed to yield their time. And if you need those names now, I can do it, or I can come back later, but so you can stop me. While I am also grateful to the EAD committee and to President Gable for their work here, I would like to express some concerns about the language in the statement and agree with Senators Ma and Ogren that I feel the statement does not nearly go far enough in calling for action steps and accountability in this work. I also note with some sadness that neither President Gable nor Potter, in their introductions of this agenda item, called the murder of George Floyd what it was, murder, not an unfortunate death or a passing or similar language that was used just at the start of this meeting. The statement itself should be updated at least to killing, where there is clarity that there was an intentional action here versus some kind of passive death. The statement also calls for a task force to work on both university issues and societal issues of racism. That feels overly broad and therefore not directly actionable. With respect to the possible creation of a task force, I would ask the language be specific to address university issues. I will note that Abdul Malik Ahmed and Ramla Muhammad, Muslim Students Association President and Vice President, in a public statement last week, have called for the creation of a Student and Community Accountability Council with direct oversight to campus policing and security. They're not alone in this call for local internal oversight and changes, as we have heard reflected by other student senators today and even some faculty senators. And I urge the administration to focus more on the grave and documented issues with campus security and campus policing, and to direct any created task forces or councils to focus efforts and actions internally and not only externally or aspirationally. We need real action and we need real change on our campus, not just guiding principles, as Senator Minton noted earlier and Senator Williams just recently echoed in their comments. So if there's an actual amendment there, it would be to update the word death to murder or at least killing, and also an amendment to make the task force language more clear to reflect the need for local action, not societal aspirational actions. Thank you.
So I think there are 2 different amendments, one of which is more clear, I mean, in terms of language. So perhaps I'll ask Professor Potter separately. There's the language on changing, although there are 2 possibilities there, death to murder or killing. Is Professor Potter?
In my opening statements, I believe wrongful death assumes that. I believe the appointment of Keith Ellison will be making the decision of how this should be, this final should be written. We acknowledge.
I guess I'm thinking about the statement itself just says the word death.
No,
the statement itself.
I said wrong.
Maybe I'm reading a different statement than you are. It's
We
a
don't
statement
have
on
a
the
copy of the updates. There's nobody, at least in the PNA Senate group, none of us have access to whatever you're updating. We are not seeing changes.
I am updating it real time and I can share it once it's done. That part hasn't been updated that I know of.
That's correct. I'm sorry, I was confusing the opening statements with the first paragraph of the proposed statement.
The word death is used alone, Chair Potter, without any adjectives throughout the statement. And I think that is something that I'm proposing be updated to be more clear and accurate for reality.
Do you have specific language to specific pieces, just because we need to have clarity if we're going to be considering it?
Yeah, it sounds like you wanted to just do murder. I think that we should start with murder. And if there is support for that, great. If there's not, we can evaluate another language.
I'm wondering if it might actually be helpful, Amber, if the current language, even though it is being updated as amendments are agreed to, whether that could be shared, because I think it's difficult to determine for
I have
people
added it.
what languages they're looking at.
I have added it to the Google Drive that everyone has access to. So I see some people are already watching the real-time updates, and that's fine. I would ask people who are offering amendments to please send me the text by email, because it's really hard to hear what people are saying and type at the same time and find the right place. Thank you.
So Noel, a specific, do you have a specific amendment for particular language?
Are we still on that earlier one talking about? Yeah. I guess I'll be clear that that I believe that the word murder is the accurate one. I guess I don't believe or know for certainty that this group would adopt that language, as I think it was Matthew had pointed out. So that would be, if I'm putting my amendment out, so to speak, it would be for that language.
And language, I'm sorry, I've been struggling trying to pull up the language myself so that I can see it. So that language doesn't, I'm trying to be clear what language that you're proposing to amend.
Where the word death appears, to replace it with murder.
Madam Chair, it's in the first paragraph, the opening paragraph, where it refers to we as a committee condemn the death of George Floyd at the hands of former Minneapolis police officer.
Okay. And I gather
even
this
the title statement itself is death instead of murder.
I believe this was not taken as a friendly amendment, so it has been moved. Is it seconded?
Second.
All right, and those who would like to speak about this amendment. I see Adam Sikla. Are you speaking about this amendment?
I am not speaking about this amendment. I have my hand up for a separate action.
I'm struggling with the same thing, struggled with before. There are many hands up, but I don't know whether they're about this or not.
This is Rhonda. My hand is up for this amendment.
Okay.
So not in disagreement with prefacing death, but by definition, murder means premeditated and unlawful. So while I understand that we want to say something stronger, homicide seems more appropriate. Murder is deciding something that hasn't been decided, right? And I think while I want us to speak for the community and represent the people in this community, I'm an African-American female faculty member on this campus. I also am constantly trying to make sure that we are not aggravate. I mean, I like to think about when we read these things in 5 years, what are we going to remember? Or in 2 months? And I feel like, saying this is a murder, which in my emotional sense, I agree with that. I think as an institution, we need to be clear and be strong, but I really preferred some of the earlier language, and I don't remember what was said, that just prefaced the death part with an adjective. But I think murder is a pretty strong language for an organization to use that hasn't considered all of the factors that make it actually be defined as murder.
Okay, well, I see the vehicle here on file.
I'll just add that the comments I used were wrongful death in my opening statements.
I like that personally.
I see Isaiah Ogren.
I understand and appreciate the impulse to not rush to language that is not verified, especially as a prospective student of the law. However, I would say that the same standards that apply to a court of law need not apply to us. I feel justified in this, particularly because the charging decision by the Hennepin County attorney was indeed murder. It was third-degree murder, which does not require an intent standard, but is still murder. So I respect my colleague and appreciate what she said about this, but I am comfortable going forward with murder because of the charging decision made by the county. Thank you.
I see a hand by Matthew Croft. Are you seeking to speak on the amendment?
Yeah, I definitely want to speak in favor of the amendment. I would like to echo kind of what Isaiah said, is that this isn't a court of law, and further, you know, the kind of, even if it was, the point that this, even an event that is not, so third-degree murder is also would be called depraved heart murder in the law, where it's not necessarily that there was an intent to kill. There was an intent to kill George Floyd, only that there was a complete indifference to whether or not George Floyd lost his life. It's a very subtle difference, but I think that watching the video that we saw, you know, the university does need to, if we care as a community that we are making a statement of support and the way we see the world, I think we shouldn't shy away, and we should use the most forceful and factually accurate language that we have. So I think that, you know, most of us would understand someone killing another person with the knowledge, you know, and taking actions with the knowledge that they may die and being told that you're going to kill them. I would tend to think that that would be plainly a murder. And, you know, so I think that language is appropriate. And I think any language that, you know, lets the officer off the hook for his responsibility, that, you know, George didn't just die on the ground, you know, there were cops that killed him. And I think the agency is very important.
Thank you. I see a hand by Kevin Wendt.
Yes, I move to amend the amendment by striking the word murder and inserting a blank for the purposes so that we can nominate any words to fill that blank. We can vote on them in succession to fill that with the word that the body feels is appropriate.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding. You're moving to amend the amendment to leave a blank for the word?
It's a parliamentary tool, right? So it creates a blank so that we can nominate any word, right? So we're not stuck with just either one, the original or murder. We can nominate all the different wordings, have them all as a set, and then we vote on them in succession until one of them is adopted to replace the wording.
I would second the motion.
I think I need some parliamentary advice on this. Just a moment. Noel, would you accept as a friendly amendment leaving the word out and having, I think that's what's being asked, having a blank so that we can discuss the word and then come to an agreement on a word?
I don't feel qualified to make a decision. I had heard someone earlier in their parliamentary wisdom say, make sure we get through comments first. So I feel like there are other people waiting to speak, and this decision might stop other people from being able to speak. So sorry, Professor Chomsky, I don't know if there's a way to allow others to speak first.
I think if we just continue the debate on your motion then, so that allows everybody to continue speaking. Those who've asked to be recognized. I see Briggs Topol with a hand raised. Are you seeking to speak on the amendment?
Yeah, in part. So I would like to echo the sentiments of my colleague Isaiah Ogren. I think he speaks from a great place of expression. And then I wanted to speak a little bit more to Noel's comment about students wanting to see a police oversight board. And I wanted to then, I was waiting for a little bit more consultation, but currently I'm currently working with other students to create such a piece of legislation. So Noel, your sentiments are heard, and they are being discussed currently.
All right, thank you. That is to the second. I had tried to separate these points, but thank you because both things were raised. Scott Petty, are you seeking to speak on this amendment?
Yes. So I wanted to share an anecdote and then talk, I guess, a little bit about semantics. So I have two friends from Australia who are from the same rough region in Australia where Justine Damond is from. And so the last few days I've been having kind of interesting email correspondence with them as I am in Minneapolis. So third-degree murder is what Officer Noor has been convicted of. Third-degree murder is a crime that only exists in 3 states. I've had pretty extensive correspondence conversations with people who have very animated opinions about Justine Damond's death. And in that conversation, it was never referred to as a murder. And I'm just saying this is an anecdote of some personal experience. The conversation was about the killing of Justine Damond. Conversation was about the shooting of Justine Damond. At no point in my conversations the last couple of days did either of my two friends in Australia speak of the murder of Justine Damond. So I would just add that as a little bit of context from a little anecdote of the only kind of comparable situation I think I can point to set precedent, in that Officer Noor was an officer of the Minneapolis Police Department. He was tried and convicted of this exact crime less than a year ago. And I do agree that death is an inappropriate word, but I would put my 2 cents in for either murder or a particularly grisly description.
All right, thanks. I'm going to ask Chris to let me know who's next.
Sure. So next on the list that I haven't heard speak to this amendment would be Maria Rude.
Thank you, Maria.
Okay, now?
Yes.
Thank you. And this may be moot, but just something in thinking about this. I appreciate the thoughtful discussion. I tend to agree with Teddy's description, I think, of wrongful death, only because I think of if and when this case goes to a trial, in looking at possible jurors, if this is, we may all be disqualified because we agreed to this document in the first place, but just something to think about, that we've kind of put out there kind of what we believe is the case in a document. So just food for thought.
Thank you. Chris, next.
Next, I have someone whose last name is, I believe, F-I-O-L. I only have their U of M X500.
All right.
Thank you. Go ahead. Can you identify yourself, since we can't tell from
I'm trying to get video. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I'm Miguel Fiola. I'm faculty senate from the medical school. I just want to make a point that maybe it's stressing as other people have said, and that is that the committee is not a court of law. The committee is trying to make recommendations to move forward, and to take a position like this and judge it a murder without having the courts go through the process. We are all entitled for a court process, and for the committee to take jurisdiction over legal matters and declare this incident, although we all feel viscerally very affected by it, it would not be an appropriate position for the committee. So I agree that a term wrongful death is probably okay, and let the courts decide what the exact terminology to be utilized. It's not our rule in the committee, and I'm part of the committee, to take a position on a legal matter when now the Attorney General is looking into this. And so I would agree that wrongful death is probably okay.
Thank you. Chris, next.
Next, I have Leanne Shore.
All right, thank you. And go ahead, Leanne.
Thank you. I'm Leanne Shore from the College of Allied Health Senator. I imagine what I have to say is not particularly popular, but I appreciate the last speaker and also what Rhonda had to say. I think what's important is that what we put out comes from an intelligent, thoughtful point of view, and not what I'm hearing, which tends to be highly emotion-filled comments that are not necessarily driven by fact or information that we have fully at our disposal at this time. I am just as concerned as everyone else is, but we are the University of Minnesota, and I want us to reflect professionalism and really a high sense of regard for our community in any statements that we put out. And that's really what's concerning me about some of the very emotion-filled comments that I'm hearing. And that makes me feel emotional myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Chris.
Next, I have Peggy Nelson.
I would just support the Professor Franklin's point and use the word killing. I think we should be direct that this was a killing. I think personally we should avoid the word murder. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope that was a little garbled, but I think I heard it. I hope others did as well. So just the connection. Next, Chris.
Next, I have an individual, N.A. Sims.
Thanks. I just got IT to change this, but of course it doesn't reflect my name in this meeting. This is Nancy Sims, PNA Senator. And I'm an attorney, and I would just like to reflect that wrongful death is also a legal standard. Murder is a legal standard defined in many different ways, so is wrongful death. I don't feel, I actually agree with the student senators, and I believe one other senator who has expressed that this group is not a court of law and therefore is not held to any standard about its use of these terms. We certainly could use the word murder. It doesn't have any legal weight when we say it, but if we're worried about things having legal weight, wrongful death also has legal weight. So I wanted to express that, and also to express that statements with strong emotion in them are just as reasonable things for people to make in this sort of circumstance, and in many circumstances, as detached statements. I am also a librarian, and there's no such thing as neutrality. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Chris.
Next up on the amendment, I have Mary Owen.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mary.
Thank you. I'd like to make a couple statements. One, I agree with reframing to wrongful death or murder, and not to use the more neutral language of death by itself. But I'd also like to thank the last speaker for clarifying that we are allowed to feel emotion, particularly for those of us of color who have felt this, I think, more than most. And also, finally, to object to the comparison to this death to that of the I apologize, I can't remember her name, but the Australian. There is no comparison. That was a 1 moment deal, 1 second event compared to a man sitting on another man's neck for a period of 8 minutes. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Chris?
Unless I am mistaken, I believe we had a couple. Jonathan Sachs.
All right, go ahead, Jonathan.
Hi, Jonathan Sachs, faculty senator from College of Science and Engineering. I echo all of the concerns and desire to express this in the strongest terms, but worry about preempting the legal definitions. What about something like heinous killing?
Noelle? Reaction to the proposal.
Yeah, I think there are some sort of side emails and discussions happening too. I think I respond both emotionally and logically and professionally to the suggestion to use a word like killing, which again has a connotation of action around it. Wrongful death sounds somehow like something that could happen if a company had lax safety standards. And I'm not an attorney and I don't know those legal definitions, but it sounds like giving a pass where a pass is not necessarily required nor deserved. So I'm not sure exactly what the question, Professor Chomsky, are you asking me to make the decision? But I'm going to always toss it for more comments and for other people to weigh in. But I think that killing is stronger than wrongful death, which still retains its, in my sense, a sense of passivity there when there was in fact clear action here.
So the question is, because it was your motion and the suggestion was to not use the current language, to change your motion to substitute heinous killing, whether you would consider that to be a friendly amendment and therefore change your proposal or not. That's why I came back to you. Sorry, I wasn't clear about that.
From what I'm hearing from the group, and it seems split, and I would like some change to happen, then I would accept heinous killing as opposed to murder, yes, but also would allow others to speak and weigh in as appropriate.
Point of order, Vice Chair Chomsky.
Please.
So Professor Wint moved to amend Chair Noonan's original amendment, and I seconded it. So I think there has to be a vote on blank, and then blank. Then you have a discussion of what the actual word would be, but that there would be a vote on blank to remove death, and then a discussion on.
As a procedural matter, I would rule that that is not an appropriate amendment. It's either an amendment to change the language, to substitute language, but not to substitute a blank. So that's why we went back to the discussion about whether to approve Noel Noonan's amendment. And then there was a question about possible alternative language, although it was not clear that it was an actual motion to change. So I think we're continuing with the discussion. If there are additional hands raised, otherwise we'll call the question on Noel Noonan's motion.
Thank you for that explanation.
Are there any others who have not spoken to the amendment who need to be recognized? Chris?
I see one last person, Ophelia Farron.
All right, thank you. Ophelia, go ahead.
Yes, I personally would, I believe that the wording needs to be changed. So definitely it needs to be a blank. And upon our discussion, we'll arrive at the right wording. I personally would be okay with saying murder, but I think that if it is a little more palatable to more people, I think that heinous killing would also be appropriate. I don't think that wrongful death would be appropriate for the same reasons that Noel mentioned earlier, and definitely not leaving it just as death.
All right, I think there are no further people being heard. So the question, the motion, I think, is to change the word death to murder. And that's.
I thought Noel accepted the friendly amendment to heinous killing.
I think, well, Noel should answer. I thought it was more of a various wording might be possible, but I think we need to take a vote in order. So if for one motion at a time. So we have a motion to change it to murder. We could consider a motion for killing. We could consider a motion for heinous killing, but I think the motion on the table is to change the language from death to murder.
I think you should ask Noel if she did accept that change from murder to heinous killing.
Noel?
Okay. I did with reluctance and asterisks. I did in the hopes that we could get that approved and move on to other comments.
Okay, I'm not sure the asterisks can carry with the the ultimate, but yes, I appreciate what you're saying. So the motion then is to replace the word death with the words heinous killing in the first paragraph. Am I right about where that is going?
Sorry, I think anywhere death appears, it appears in the heading and then it appears in the first paragraph as well. So,
okay.
Yes.
So that is the motion on the table. I think we are ready to vote on that.
Point of order to Amber. There's another mention of death in the second to last line of the introductory paragraph. Is George Floyd's death? Thank you.
We'll give about 10 more seconds if all would please vote. Last call. Vice Chair Chomsky, there being 114 ayes and 40 nays, the motion is approved.
All right, thank you. So that amendment will be made. We return to the discussion of the full statement, I believe.
Yes, and I have one person who is still in the queue for that, Adam Sikla.
Thank you. Adam, go ahead.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes.
We got you.
Hello. I'm lucky enough to be outside the most heavily affected areas of the current events, but I am representing students who have been displaced, put in danger, or simply in fear due to the ongoing violence. So in order to bring this up as a point of discussion, I would like to bring up opposition to the amendment from Student Senate Chair Ma, specifically the removal of the bullet point. In this context, we advocate against rioting, looting, and expressing our sympathy and concern about small business owners, community members whose livelihoods, homes have been destroyed. While I can understand changing the wording due to cultural implications, as was pointed out by my fellow senators, I do believe that it is important that we advocate against violent actions in some capacity. We spoke today about a lack of statement as compliance in several different contexts. We need to be careful about to word issues in a culturally sensitive manner, but also we cannot ignore actions that put members of our community in danger.
Do you have an amendment, or is that a?
Specifically, I would counter, I want to, I guess, counter the amendment that was the removal of that bullet point of putting it back on, and then presumably this makes it a point of discussion for the rest of the Senate.
All right. So I believe that would, it's a motion to reconsider. We have not, I'm sorry, I need some advice on the progress of that particular item. The language is in or it's out now. I have to get a determination of that. It was a friendly amendment to remove the language. So you are moving to reinsert it, is that correct?
Correct.
All right.
I am open to changing wording, but I do want to move to reinsert that language.
Professor Potter, you accepted the deletion as a friendly amendment, so I assume you would not accept putting that back in this form, but I shouldn't make a determination for you.
I'm a little confused about this because it's gone in many directions. I can reflect the intent of the committee, and that was to make sure that we did not, we were concerned about claiming a legal stance that we didn't perhaps have a right to claim. And that was the intent.
So I think what we have is a motion to reinsert the language that was omitted. Is there a second for that motion?
I
Can I-
second.
So heinous killing is not part of it now?
That's a separate, we've done with that. That
Thank you.
amendment was voted on. This is a new proposal to reinsert the language. Perhaps it could be repeated exactly which bullet point. Adam, I think you were the one proposing this.
Yes, in this context, we advocate against rioting, looting, and expressing our sympathy. Let me find the exact wording from the original document, and I will.
Still on the agenda.
If I may, Vice Chair Chomsky.
Yes, please.
I believe he's asking about the sixth bullet point of the second section where it says we advocate against rioting, looting, and expressing our sympathy and concern about small business owners and community members whose livelihoods and homes have been destroyed by vandalism and fires.
Correct.
So I accepted that as a friendly amendment originally, but I think given that there's varying opinions on this statement, it would be wise to bring it to a vote.
If you don't accept it as a friendly amendment, then it remains in the statement. I think we need a discussion or debate about this to make a determination.
Madam Chair.
I see several hands but I'm not sure who wants to be recognized for this versus something else. David and I see.
Madam Chair, I rise to a privileged motion.
That's Kevin Wen?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I call for the orders of the day. We're far over an hour.
I'm sorry, I could not hear that.
I call for the orders of the day. We're far over the hour that was allotted for this.
We are over the time. We had made a choice not to try to ask for a formal extension of time. But perhaps now is the time to do that. We have 11 minutes left in the meeting. We are, as was indicated in the materials that were shared before the meeting started, as President Gable said at the outset, there will be another meeting to talk about the financial implications that were originally scheduled for this meeting. So that will continue then. Is there a motion to extend debate?
Madam Vice Chair, point of order. I believe that when you make a motion for orders of the day, that requires you as the chair to proceed to the scheduled item of business as long as the assembly decides otherwise by 2/3 vote. I think we have to have that vote automatically.
Madam Chair, okay, wait, I'm sorry. So Isaiah is saying that we are now voting on that, correct? This is a clarification. Okay, thank you, because I was about to move something anyway.
I would ask that we take a 5-minute break so that we can confer, those of us trying to figure out where we are procedurally. Obviously, there's some confusion here about progress and how we go forward. And so we need a few moments to figure that out. So let's, do we need a motion for that?
Motion for a 10-minute recess.
Second.
All right. All those, can the clerk put up a vote for that?
Please give me 1 second to get that.
Sure.
Can we just ask for objection?
Yes.
Does
Any
anyone
objection?
does anyone object?
Hearing none, we will take a 10-minute break. That will be past the time when the meeting was supposed to end, but we will come back to make determinations. So we'll see you in a few minutes. Thank you.
Question while we're in the break. This document doesn't seem to be showing all of the proposed amendments that have been accepted as friendly amendments. Is there going to be some clarity as to what exactly we're voting on?
You may need to refresh your page.
It's not impossible that I missed something. So if there is something that you think was approved, please let me know and I can go back and make sure that first verify that it was and then add it.
I'm thinking there are points that were made in the very first friendly amendment, or maybe it was the second one, that are missing from this that were somewhat contentious for me.
If that was Professor Friedman Sanchez, I think I have all of her points in there. I have it highlighted right now.
Email, I'm shooting up Easter.
Okay, I think we are ready to come back and try to bring back some the sequence here. Sorry, I had to start my video again as well. It appears that the person who raised the order of the day was correct. Thank you. And we are compelled because of that, because of the agenda, to move to a discussion of the item that that would otherwise be considered at this point, which is the financial issue, unless 2/3 of the body votes to continue with the current item. We have a poll prepared. I believe the clerk can take a vote about whether to continue with the current item or go with the order of the day, which would move us on to the financial discussion. Chris, do we have a poll for that prepared?
I do. My apologies, my Gmail just crashed. But I was going to say, in order to do so, I believe you would need a motion and second to call for a vote.
I motion to call for a vote.
I second.
Second. All right, so the question, and let me have Chris put the question up so we can be sure we're doing it in the proper, that we understand what the motion is.
The motion is to extend the debate on the EAD statement, which requires a 2/3 vote of those present and voting.
All right, so if we can begin the poll.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I think the president said that we could continue discussions on Thursday on the statement that we are voting right now to continue today. I think that was an option open to us. So I don't know if the motion is properly worded that discussions can continue next Thursday.
So after we answer this first question, which is whether we must move on from this discussion, we need a positive vote to continue the debate on the equity, access, and diversity motion. And then we were planning to continue discussing on Thursday the financial piece, but I was going to entertain a motion then to defer the vote on the EAD statement until Thursday as well, to ensure that we get the language right, and that and we could continue the discussion then as well, although we can continue the discussion today if this vote is positive. So, so yes, I plan to raise that, but we needed to first get past the hurdle of continuing the discussion on the EAD item, which on the agenda. So thank you for raising that.
Again, there's a lot of meetings going on. There's a lot. So I think this was planned to end at 4, so we committed our time elsewhere. I'm sorry, Madam Chair. So I just want to bring that up, that we have other commitments and that we have to go to.
Yes, we do understand that.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chris?
Vice Chair Chomsky, are you ready to close the poll?
Yes. Give a little warning and then we'll close the poll.
I've closed it. It was open for over 2 minutes, so I think we're there.
Okay.
So with 95 ayes and 58 nays, we did not reach the 2/3 threshold. The motion does not prevail, so I believe it would go back to the next order of business.
All right, that means we have to, we will have to continue any further consideration of the EAD item on Thursday at the next meeting if we at another meeting. We need to move on at this stage.
Madam Chair, this is, if I might just add that this, we recognize the importance of this document and people needing to get the wording right. But we, as a committee, are very concerned that we want to take quick action and not have this delayed and reflect lack of concern.
Thank you. I think that it is very clear how much concern there is. I think the enormity of the events and everybody's emotional and other reactions to it has been very clear from the discussion, and the delay is because so many people want to be heard in this discussion, and so we appreciate that, I think, and ask for everyone's understanding about delaying really both matters until another meeting. We have the agenda item would be now to begin discussion of the next item on the agenda. I think I will recognize Amy Pittenger to begin that consideration.
All right, thanks, Carol. I think that perhaps I'm just going to give a few introductory comments and then maybe also get advice about perhaps postponing our discussion to June 4th. We do have another Senate meeting planned. We don't know the time yet, but we will know that very soon. I'll just begin by stating that you were all given some updated information today. We have received, the work group has received, the FCC has received, the president has received many comments already. And you will see reflected in the revised version that was some of the materials sent out today, those suggestions reflected. And so please look at that material carefully. And my hope is that we can continue the conversation, postpone this conversation for Thursday, since it's already been a long meeting, and also the materials were only circulated just before the Senate meeting began. So instead of sort of diving into the topic, I'm wondering if we could perhaps call for a motion to postpone the discussion of the financial issues until our June 4th Senate meeting.
I would move to table.
So moved.
Second.
So there's a motion to move the discussion, I heard somebody say something about tabling, but what we want to do is move the discussion to date certain, which is June 4th, so that we will be able to reconvene and talk about, and so that we are committed to doing that at the meeting on June 4th. There is a motion to continue the discussion on June 4th with respect to the financial implications. Can we take a poll on that motion? Is there debate on the motion?
May I call the question?
The question has been called. As soon as the clerk can get a poll up so that we can vote on it.
Yes, thank you for that extra second. I will launch the poll now.
Thank you. And it says postponement, but I believe it is to the June 4th meeting.
That is correct. We have about 10 more seconds. If you wish to vote, please do so now. And last call. Vice Chair Chomsky, there being 137 ayes and 8 nays, the motion is approved.
All right, so that reaches the end of the agenda for today.
Madam Chair, I would like
Am I
to.
supposed to debate that?
What? I'm sorry.
I did not hear someone asked a question.
I was making a motion. I would like to move for, considering that we have postponed any further business, I would like to move for the reconsideration of, what was it, agenda item 2?
I think the order of the day takes us past that. I think the intention will be to continue to revise the agenda for June 4th to continue the EAD discussion. And
respectfully, I guess then I would be moving to suspend the rules to add a reconsideration of agenda item number 2 to the agenda.
So there's a motion to amend amend the rules? I'm sorry, I need to.
I believe that we have to suspend the rules to amend an accepted agenda.
I think the motion, just one moment while I get some. The motion to adjourn is, I believe, of higher priority and has to be taken up before the subsequent motion.
Did we move to adjourn though? I believe my motion is the only thing on the table.
I don't believe anyone has moved to adjourn.
So there was some discussion of it, but there is only a motion to revise the agenda to come back to further discussion of the EAD motion.
I will second that motion.
That requires a 2/3. It's not debatable. I believe it requires a 2/3 vote. 2/3 vote. So that is the motion on the table, is to extend the debate today and return to item 2, which is the EAD motion.
One second, I'm getting there. Getting the poll up.
Thank you.
To be clear, sorry, this is today or in the future?
This is today.
So it's the motion to keep going with this meeting and continue discussing the Equity, Access, and Diversity Committee statement.
Yes, the motion is to revise the agenda to return to the EAD item today. If this is approved, then 2/3, we will continue the discussion today. We will turn to that agenda item. If it is not approved, we will, I believe, return to the agenda item, but just not today.
You said that you believe we will. Can you confirm that we would return to it at a later date? Sorry to be pushy.
We need to notice it on the special meeting, but I am confident that we will do that. Yes. This is not an attempt. This is an attempt on timing, not on. We will return to it. On Thursday, I think.
Vice Chair Chomsky, the poll's been open for over a minute. May I ask for a 10-second warning? Last call. There being 60 ayes and 77 nays, the item is not approved.
All right, the item is not approved. I thank you, everyone. I think we will entertain a motion to adjourn now, but I just want to say I thank everyone for their patience in times of stress and difficulty and high emotions on many things. We are doing, as everyone is doing, the best we can to deal with these things as fully and respectfully as possible, even in the midst of procedural issues and meeting challenges. So I thank everyone for their patience. I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved. Second.
If the clerk can raise the poll so we can vote.
About 10 more seconds. And last call. Madam Vice Chair, there being 118 ayes and 8 nays, the motion is approved.
Thank you. Thank you. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.